Welcome to Eternal Feather Film. My name is Coral Hahn, the indie producer here, and I just wanted to share a little bit about how Eternal Feather Film came to be. So, I've always been an artist, and on my website you may notice my Etsy store, my Zazzle store, and my soon-to-be books. I incorporate that into, as a secondary means of trying to raise money for the films that I want to do, for this, the TV shows that I hope to be a part of and do, and to produce. But I am aware of pitch platforms, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a website sort of like Patreon, but specifically for films, and then I would give an intro video of what the film is about, where the money is going, what the main needs are financially. So I will incorporate that into my website when I get the cast and crew that I need to make my senior film that I really want to complete. I'm 5 classes away from my bachelor's in film and television. So I do wire wraps on my Etsy store. I do necklaces as a sort of hobby. I also have a Zazzle store. They screen print and provide all the clothing, accessories, all that stuff that I put my original designs on. And so I only get the royalties. I only get 10% because they do all the screen printing and things like that. So the more customers I have, the better. So Eternal Feather Film came about years ago now, when I started film school, and it was a big switch from being an artist and struggling to see how I would make ends meet being an illustrator alone, and probably having a job that I wouldn't know how. At that time I didn't know how that would work out, part-time work and illustrator, like how does this all, will I be able to make ends meet? And somebody really challenged me on what do you really want to do with your life. And although I had always been encouraged and have been encouraged in the arts and to continue to use that gift that God has given me, I was like, do I really see myself at the drawing table like 9, 10, 12 hours a day? And I didn't. So I was like, what do I want to do with my life? So I went back. It required going back in time and seeing and observing what I grew up wanting to do that I never really had the guts to take hold of, that dream that I really wanted to take a hold of. Well, growing up, I really, and I still do, I love nature, I love the ecosystems, being Eternal Feather Film, I encourage and promote, products and things that help the environment, are good products that, companies that are good stewards of the planet that we're called to biblically live by. So, and I advocate for that. So, excuse me, I wanted to go into nature. I saw myself, I was like, I want to travel the world, I want to film with sharks and, do all this crazy, wild stuff that, nobody hardly ever gets to do, and I want to go for that. Well, it didn't quite turn out the way that I had hoped or that I had imagined myself to, into the film industry. So, but that's okay, because I had my own adventure, and along the way, it really helped me to delve deep of where did I fit in with film at all? Because, I was trained in a secular school, and I was trained very well, but it didn't seem like I would, being in the secular world, I didn't really fit in as a Christian. And then it was even more interesting to find out that I didn't fit into the Christian film industry, because there's unfortunately a lot, not everybody, but a lot of ego, a lot of agenda, gospel-driven agenda, and I just was more of a creative turn of mind. I'm more like Narnia, Tolkien, kind of sci-fi, sci-fantasy kind of person. And I love that film is a strong teaching tool. A lot of the secular people I was around were in it for the money. There were very few people that I actually found out they really loved the story aspect, and that it's a teaching tool. It teaches us, morals. It's storytelling. And I love that. I love story. Ever since I was little, I wrote stories since I was little, and I am currently working on some books, my poetry collection being the first, hopefully, illustrated poetry collection. I'm still working on finding a publisher for it. But for film, I didn't fit in with the secular people, even though I got trained wonderfully, and I didn't fit in with the Christian people because not only of the ego and agenda, but also the Christian mindset. When I go to church, and I was asked, what do you do? And I was like, well, I'm going into film. The primary response from the Christians was, like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Like, when you make it big, don't forget the little people. And my brain just went, what? That's, there are no little people in the kingdom of God. So I wrote a book about it, which I still have to get published. But it really made me aware of, how I was like, where do I fit in? And, what am I supposed to do with this gift that I really want? Because I started out, wanting to show God's creation, in nature videography, etc. But then I became aware of the need for good family films, because I would go into Blockbuster and I would see all the huge horror section and the huge comedy section, the huge drama section, and the little bitty little bitty family film section, and a little bitty sci-fi fantasy section. And so I was like, me being, I love documentary, I love history, I love the nature. I grew up watching The Crocodile Hunter, Marty Stauffer's Wild America, and so, but then, I was introduced to the need for good family films, and I wanted to do that. But there didn't seem room for me in the Christian film industry. So, and the response that I got from Christians, the primary response, like I said, when you make it big, don't forget the little people. I was like, I'm more of a missionary heart, and there's a reason to that. And there's a reason why the Native nations in particular, although there are other people groups that need cinematographers, directors, film folks to be able to tell the story of how Jesus is working in their culture and in their life. So when I was little, I went to a private school in grade school, and one Thanksgiving we were told we could either dress up as a pilgrim or a Native American. Well, me being a warrior and loving nature, I was like, I'm gonna get to be a Native American. I don't have to do the pilgrim thing. I want to know more. And, I had this hunger, for knowledge and, a desire to learn. And unfortunately for me, I was stuck in a black dress and a white cap, which is very uncomfortable, and I hated it. And I just, like, and then later on, when I was probably like 8 or 9, I remember telling my mother at church, like, I don't want to go to heaven because my imagery, my understanding of heaven was that we went to heaven and sang the hymns over and over and over and over for eternity. Well, I didn't get it at that time, but later, when I was in high school, I started making more friends from different cultural backgrounds, like Hispanic, Native American, African American, and really began to understand, like, um, more a little bit about the cultures, about the, and began to understand that we, there's so many new, fresh songs from so many different nations, tribes, and tongues, like it says in Revelation. And that just opened me up to a whole new world. And I was like, whoa, so this is what heaven's like. Why aren't we bringing it here to earth? Because, we pray the prayer in the Bible, like, on earth as it is in heaven. And I was like, so if it's this way in heaven, why aren't we doing something about that in the world of film? Thankfully, in recent years, I have found things like Chosen People and other indie filmmakers and little companies that are popping up and sharing these stories of testimonies and things like that. But for me, with the Native Nations, I had a very close friend in high school who was Native American. And so when I went to my first year in college, I heard Richard Twist come and speak at the Christian college I was at, the chapel. And then the next year, I had transferred to an entirely different state, entirely different school, and he came to speak there. And I was like, I think God has something in mind for me with the Native Nations. I'm not sure what. I wasn't even in film back then. And I was like, just hungry to know more and to minister, because I did see that the church largely has been and continues to see, unfortunately, not only the Native Nations, but like cultures who aren't, white, contemporary, whatever, the cookie cutter thing, as irrelevant. And not only that, but they have been presenting Jesus as a covenant breaker rather than a covenant keeper and a covenant maker, but moreover, covenant keeper. So that was important to me, is important still. In the heart of Eternal Feather Film is to, as I step out here with very little resources, financially or people-wise, networking, as I continue to network and get to meet people, I really hope that whether it's in short story format or a TV series, I actually hope to do, to show, to educate Christians as the history of North America, not from the pioneer standpoint, not from the typical well-known or established viewpoint, but the stories that are untold. Not only the historic stories that did happen, but the stories that are emerging of how the Native Nations, Native people have come to know Jesus as a covenant keeper rather than a covenant breaker. and that just so blesses me, and I want to be able to share that somehow. And what is a rising, like the events that have been popping up, such as all in DC, with the all tribes gathering, I believe it is, and things like that. People's stories, like the history, in the in prior days, and the history that is happening now, the healing that is taking place, and so I don't know where this will go, but I'm excited to see, very, very excited to see where Yeshua leads with this. So I invite you to come to my website to check out the art, to check out the projects that I have in mind that I hope to do. If you want to network and collaborate, I am on Facebook, Eternal Feather Film Facebook. So, as well, I'm on Twitter, not as much on Twitter, but I am on Twitter, I'm on Pinterest. So I would love to get to know you, and so this is just a little bit about what Eternal Feather Film and I am. And oh, I forgot to mention, a few years ago my grandfather passed away, and I inherited a painting from my great-grandfather, which I have included at this table here at the Native Nations, starting out the Native Nations gathering in Vacaville Mission Church. He did it 101 years ago, I think it was 1916, in a time when he was also an artist. He became a cartoonist, actually, but what he really wanted to do was to paint the native style, the native way of life, and he never got around to it. So me having a personal history with having Native friends, having, love of Native American culture, and seeing how Jesus has worked in it, I was just even more inspired that, like, he never got around to do it, but I would really love to bring my love of storytelling and film, and because the Native culture is a storytelling, is a vital part of their culture. I would love to weave with that. So, all right, may you be blessed. Bye.